Welcome back to Let the Stones Speak. My name is Christopher Eames, your host for today's program. We're back in the office. We just finished our latest excavation on Jerusalem's Ophel, led by Professor Yosef Garfinkel of Hebrew University, our first excavation under his directorship. And on the last day of our excavation, earlier this week, I sat down with him to discuss the excavation, the goals that were reached on the excavation, his view of the site itself, and where we see ourselves going forward. So we hope you enjoy this sort of roundup for the excavation that we just completed. If you do, leave us a thumbs up, like and subscribe. And if you're not already subscribed to our magazine, Let the Stones Speak, I'll leave a link in the description for that. Our latest issue is hitting mailboxes right now. So do make sure you go ahead and subscribe to that magazine if you're interested at all in biblical archaeology. So we hope you enjoy this excavation summary with Professor Yosef Garfinkel. Professor Yosef Garfinkel, here we are at the end of another season. It's hard to believe in a way, but here we are. It's been a privilege and honor excavating with you. How do you feel the season has gone?
First of all, it was great to work with Armstrong student and with Chris that really took over and managed to organize everything in a perfect way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And really, the people are so enthusiastic, unbelievable. I think that any other group of students will need double time, if not more, to achieve the same capacity of work. Amazing.
Yeah, we really have moved a lot of stones for such a short period of time. How many do you think we've, how much?
Well, we didn't calculate everything, but I can estimate that at least 300 tons of stones has been removed in this project.
Right, over the course of 3-4 weeks. It's an incredible amount of work. And we were talking a bit last week about your excavation history, and this is the first time you've excavated, led an excavation in Jerusalem. It's not actually the first time that you've excavated personally in Jerusalem, nor is it the first time you've worked with our people. Is that right? Maybe you can explain.
Yes, as a student, I work in City of David Excavations, which were directed by the late Yigal Shiloh. And I remember at the time it was not even called Armstrong College, it was called Ambassador College, and the guys were extremely enthusiastic. It's really amazing. You know, your institute started to excavate in Jerusalem with Benjamin Mazar in the 1970s, with Yigal Shiloh in the 1980s, then with Eilat Mazar in the 2000s. And recently you're working with Uzi Leibner and Orit Peleg in the upper part of the Ophel, and here we started a new project in the lower part of the Ophel. This is amazing. Jerusalem belongs to you.
Well, it's a legacy we're certainly proud of, and we're really honored to be working with so many really professional archaeologists over the years, and now yourself. But you personally weren't so much looking to excavate in Jerusalem. You're famous for excavating other sites, perhaps not so eager initially to excavate Jerusalem. What were the reasons for that?
The ideal archaeological site, from my point of view, is a site of one period. It was never occupied. It was occupied, and then it was never reoccupied. And then everything is kept as people left it. And this is the ideal situation. Mm-hmm. And I have a site like this in Shara Golan, where it was only Neolithic, or I work in another site called Tel Tzaf, which was just Chalcolithic, nothing later. And this is really a pleasure because nobody came and touched and removed stone and dug pit into. Jerusalem, on the other hand, suffers all the time. You have the first temple period, but then you have the second temple, and people from the second temple destroyed the remains of the first temple. And then came the Byzantine, and then destroyed everything that was earlier. And then came the Crusade, the Islamic period, and again built to bedrock and destroyed large part of what has been earlier. So Jerusalem is a nightmare as an archaeological site.
Right.
And I prefer easy life.
Yeah, well, you've had some amazing sites for that. Kirbet Qeiyafa comes to mind, just a beautiful primarily single period site there. And yeah, you come to Jerusalem and it's a real puzzle. And we've spent the last month puzzling over certain parts of this site.
Every wall that you dismantle, we had to be sure that it's indeed, all of it was Byzantine or Second Temple, and not if sometime the earlier courses might be from the First Temple period. So it was really a challenge to be sure about what we are dismantling and what we are exposing, to be sure that we are not making any mistakes.
Right. So maybe you can summarize just briefly what we've done at the site over the past season, like what have been the main projects we've worked on here?
Basically, we would like to prepare this area for the public. Archaeologists can come and understand what's going on, but it was very condensed here. We have here the First Temple period, the remains. They were covered by Second Temple period remains, and these were covered by Byzantine remains. And everything was very condensed, one on top of the other. There was almost no space to go around and to understand what's going on. And after dismantling first this part, we removed all the later Byzantine walls. Suddenly it became an open courtyard, which is amazing. And we also discovered more walls and more remains and rock cut in the bedrocks that we now have better understanding what was happening in this part. Later we excavated the other side. We removed mainly walls from the Second Temple period, not Byzantine, and there was a mikveh that after removing it, we found a continuation of the Iron Age gate. And altogether, I think that now the area is waiting to be restored and to be presented to the public.
And I love the first time we went around the site with you a few years ago, my colleague Brent Nagtegale and I, your perspective here was just about how to present it to the tourists, because we've got a lot of walkways and such here, but none at all really restoration of the walls themselves. And I think you said something at the time about the tourists coming, they don't really stand a chance to try and interpret the different walls unless you've really read the excavation reports and then really closely read the signs. So I think that that's a real important part of this excavation, maybe less so even the excavation, but then the restoration that will happen from it, using some of these stones that we've dismantled to recreate the walls, following that vision of yours. So you mentioned Gatehouse. We have some differing opinions, obviously, of the nature of exactly what went on here, but perhaps you could tell our viewers what your concept or vision of the site was back during the Iron Age, how the site appeared, how it would have functioned.
We are here very close to the valley, the Kidron Valley, and specifically in one of the most steep cliffs that we have here in Jerusalem on the valley. And exactly in this location, 3 big towers were constructed during the First Temple period. These were first uncovered by Charles Warren, a British archaeologist who worked here about 150 years ago. Later, when Eilat Mazar, Benjamin Mazar, and mainly Eilat Mazar excavated here, they discovered a gate that leading into the towers. So the towers are not just part of a city wall, but you have a special gate leading into the towers. Now the question is how to understand the whole complex. And the way I understand it, that this was the royal suite of the kings of Judah, because they chose the most protected part of the city. And the towers are standing for 20 meters. They were constructed with megalithic stones, so they also represent the powers of the kingdom. It's not just architecture, it's also architecture with political message. Now, the kings, I think, prefer to be protected as much as possible. So leading into the royal suite, there was a gate. Beside the gate of the city and the gate to the palace, there was another gate just for the royal suite. So I think that we are sitting in the courtyard, leading into the gate, and from the gate into the royal suite. You mentioned that we disagree a bit about the gate. The problem here is that it was all built and rebuilt and rebuilt. The question, what are the remains that we have in our hands? And there is one chamber very nicely preserved for nearly from bottom bedrock all the way up. It's maybe 6-7 meters. Wonderful preservation, but it's only one chamber. The question, how many chambers were in the gate? The chambers are always symmetrical. So if we have one here, certainly we have another one on the other side. And indeed, in our excavation, we uncovered 3, or it was uncovered before, but we uncovered another wall, and altogether we have 3 walls out of 4 for the chamber. And the 4th wall, which is missing, was destroyed by a mikveh. The question if there was 2 more chambers, or even 2 or 4 more. So the question if it's a 2-chamber gate, 4-chamber gate, and 6-chamber gate. Personally, I think that we have evidence for 2 chambers, that's for sure. There is some remnants that might be interpreted as 4 chambers. And maybe even some remnant, but they are even weaker, that there was a 6-chamber gate. So from my point of view, it's not so important if the gate has 2, 4, or 6 chambers. It's important to have a gate, a courtyard, a gate leading to the towers. This is the important thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you that fundamental aspect of having opposing chambers, that's the key here. And debate could be had about further chambers further back, but to visualize that gatehouse and that thoroughfare, you need those 2 chambers on the other side. So I think that's really the key.
I remember that when Eilat worked here, and I was a student, but I came to visit, and later there were discussions about the area here. And
1986, this would have been?
6, 7, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And there were debate if this is a gate at all.
Mm-hmm.
What was strange here is that usually the chambers are open. A gate, you have a central passageway and chambers from the side, 2, 4, or 6. And there was a debate if this is a gate at all, because the chamber is not completely open to the passageway, but it says a doorway leading into the chamber.
Right, sort of a closed chamber.
Exactly, and this was a bit unusual, or it was unique. But a few years later in Jordan, they found a gate from the same period with the same architecture. So it's not, nobody debated it's a gate. And this is already a great achievement.
Right, and the other area of debate has been if this is an entry point into the city from outside or an entry into an enclosed tower. Now, Eilat and Benjamin Mazar identified it as an entry point from the outside. I sympathize with that view. You believe it's an entry point simply into a closed tower, and you describe this in the context especially of the politics in the 9th century BCE. Maybe you could explain that a little bit, the political situation.
Well, I think that we know that Solomon built a temple and a palace in the higher part of Jerusalem, so it's in this area plus minus a few 100 meters. We don't know exactly the location. But what's happened after 2 generations, 3 generations, 4 generations? You have a kid and grandkid, son and grandson, and so on and so forth. And the king has more wives and more people and servants. So the palace, which in the beginning has maybe 50 people, after a century will have 500 people living in it. And later, maybe 700 people. So it became more and more populated. And there was a need to build new wings and another wing and another wing over time. Also, all these people need food and water, so there will be storage places where they would keep all these necessities. So I think that the palace became bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And then in a certain point where it was everything was already well occupied, they took the slope, which was not occupied at all, 20 meters, and they built 3 towers that are located in this location because all the rest was already occupied. So it cannot be from the very beginning, but the question is when it was done. And second question, why it's so well protected? From 3 sides, you just have a cliff, and then you have a gate from the 4th side. So I think that it can be associated with the instability during the 9th century BC. We know that there was a problem with the king. Some kings were murdered. Amaziah, for example, ran away to Lachish. There was a coup, he ran away to Lachish. His servant ran after him, killed him in Lachish, and then brought his body and buried him in Jerusalem. And I think that in under such situation, it would be reasonable to remove the royal suite and to put it in the most protected part in Jerusalem.
Okay. And final question, where do we go from here as far as the site goes? We're finishing up another season, or our first season with you, and where do we go from here?
As we said, Warren Towers are standing for 20-meter height. And there is a road going on part of them, but the most eastern edge is beyond the road. And I think that it will be, again, wonderful project to uncover this wall all the way down to bedrock. And people who are walking in the Kidron Valley, on one side they have the cemetery to the east with monument like Yad Shalom and other Hellenistic burial monument. And on the other side they will see the royal suite of the kings of Judah standing for 20 meters. The most impressive archaeological remains that we have in Israel from the biblical period.
Right, and a lot of people just walk past on this road, walk by, and they don't know that this most incredible structure from the Iron Age in Judah, in Israel, perhaps, is right beneath their feet. So even just to visualize part of it on the other side of the road would just be an incredible thing. So hopefully we'll see what happens.
As we said, next year in Jerusalem.
Bizrat Hashem. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Garfinkel.
So thank you for everything.
It's been a
It was
pleasure.
a pleasure to work with you.
Yeah.